Aaron Hamlin, the executive director of the Center for Election Science on. Thanks for coming today, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
So, Aaron, I wanted to get you on because democracy is changing rapidly. The rise of Trump, the rise of social media, everything has made essentially everything up to this point very different. At least that's what it feels like. This is your background. I wanted to learn a little bit more about where we're headed from a democracy standpoint and what's wrong.
Sure. So from a democracy standpoint, what we focus on at the Center for Election Science is studying and advancing better voting methods. And so one of the places where we really can't get ignored is with our vote. And so it's all the more important that it's more effectual. And so that's why the very way that we vote is so important.
What do you mean by that? The way that we vote? For most people, voting is just they have a paper ballot, or maybe they're doing something electronic. They don't really think about the way they vote. They don't think about anything. They just think that that's how voting works. They don't really know the behind the scenes. A lot of people don't know representative type governments and how you can have the electoral college, et cetera. Can you break down just a little bit more for listeners in the US how the system works and then what some of the flaws are? I think I've heard you or others say that we have probably the worst democracy in the world in terms of how it's structured.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate. So normally when you go to vote, you get in your voting booth and you have a sheet of paper in front of you or some screen, and the directions tell you to choose only one candidate for, say, when you're voting for a president or a governor or a mayor. And that doesn't normally elicit anything strong in us in terms of feelings, but it creates big issues. So if there are multiple similar candidates running, we can't support all of them. So the support for those candidates divides between them. And if there's a candidate that you like, but maybe you perceive them as not being very viable, well, you may, instead of choosing your favorite candidate, choose another candidate who is maybe the lesser of two evils amongst the front runners. You're having these issues where this voting method is gathering very little information, and the little information that it does gather is often bad because people are pushed into voting dishonestly. And then you have secondary symptoms like good candidates not running because they don't want to be a spoiler. You have third party and independent or other newcomer candidates being marginalized so that their ideas aren't fairly heard when they actually do bring good ideas to the table. So you have all these issues come up as a mere result of forcing us to choose only one candidate.
And my understanding is it's primarily the winner take all aspect of the US. Essentially, if you have only two parties, they have to become more and more dissimilar to remain two parties as opposed to merging into one. Because you have a winner take all dynamic, does that always become more and more extreme? Because otherwise the third and second party would compromise and become a joint party to overtake the first. And we can't allow that to happen. So we have to become more dissimilar.
So winner take all that means is that you have a single contest. So you might look at something where we have something that's a legislative body, but in the US, we take something that's a legislative body, like, say, a US House or US Senate, and we make those single member districts. And that they're single member districts, that's what makes them winner take all. And so they're using a single winner voting method. And our choose one voting method is just one of many single winner voting methods. There are instances where you have to have a single winner voting method because there are offices that are inherently single winner executive offices. And so when you're using these single winner voting methods, you have to be using a good single winner voting method. There are possibilities for things that are not winner take all. You could do multi-member districts, for instance, and that would be not winner take all. And there's a whole class of those, whether they be block systems or proportional representation type systems.
Let's talk about some of those other systems, the pros and cons of each, because I don't think most people have ever even considered the possibility that there are different ways to structure a democracy.
Fortunately, there are.
Fortunately, just changing the rules here might require a revolution. The people in power kind of like the rules.
So the single winner voting method that we push at the Center for Election Science is a voting method called approval voting. With approval voting, instead of selecting just one candidate, you can select all the candidates that you approve of. So it's really simple. It means that you can use all the same types of voting mechanics. It's agnostic to voting mechanics in terms of whether you're using a machine, a paper ballot. The ballot design can look the same. The only real difference is the directions to tell you that you can select as many as you approve of instead of just one. And so this simple change of letting you select as many as you want has all kinds of advantages.
And this is like when you're watching a Netflix movie with friends, and I want this one or that one, and she wants that one or this one, and there's no overlap. But there are movies that we would both like. If we were able to select all of the ones we would like as opposed to just picking one, you find a movie much faster, and it's one we both like more.
That's right. Yeah, it's a very simple concept. You could think of it as like a thumbs up, thumbs down for each particular option. And that simple change has a lot of benefits. So with this particular voting method, you can always support your honest favorite candidate, no matter what. Even if this candidate is a long shot, they're not viable at all. If you like what they're saying, what they're bringing to the table, you can support that candidate. And if you want at the same time to hedge your bets to try to have an effect on who the winner is, you can support one of the other frontrunners that you find acceptable at the same time as supporting your honest favorite. And that flexibility makes it so that even if, say, you don't get your honest favorite as the winner, you at least give them an accurate reflection of support, you and all the other people supporting that candidate who otherwise would not have been able to. And as a consequence, those ideas that they brought to the table, they get heard and they're not marginalized the way that they would otherwise be under our choose one voting method, which pushes those candidates aside.